What's up, everybody? It's Fussy Bird again, and today I wanted to share with you my Fireball Sorceress. I've been working on the build for the past 4 or 5 days now on stream. It is safe to say the build is still a work in progress as I work towards building the last of the Renown in. We did just reach level 100 last night, so that was a huge landmark to hit, and making the build has been a lot of fun, even with the frustration combined. Some of the pros of the build, obviously excellent clear, as you can see on the screen. We have great crowd control, beautiful explosions, and we can off-screen most of the game, and of course, it's off meta, which is also a really nice thing if you just like playing skills that are not getting as much love as some of the others. Some cons of the build are that it's at the moment lacking some attack speed. I needed to get my mana sustain layers properly built in before I really started to even think about attack speed, and now that I do have them built in properly, I believe that now we can finally scale some attack speed in here. So my plan is to likely replace one of my affixes on the gloves to gain some attack speed there, as well as use the elixir for some attack speed there, and then with some of my last Paragon points, grab a little bit of the attack speed off of the Paragon tree as well, and hopefully that should help smooth out some of that lack of attack speed. The build does still need more cooldown reduction as well. I'm lacking a bit on my amulet and my helmet. They both don't have anywhere near max rolls, so they definitely need to have a little more cooldown reduction there. The single target gets hindered because of that stifling mana cost in the early game, but it is still viable. I would say during your earliest phases, you should be using Firebolt and make sure that you have the enchant or the enhancement on it that gives you mana back on hit. That's really going to help you sustain your mana in the early game. During the late game, once you've gotten your aspects in on your rings, you've gotten your flame shield with its enhancement, you've gotten basically everything, you've got your character pretty beefed up at this point, lots of mana cost reduction and resource gen, etc. At that point, the single target really starts to pick up. And again, it's just a matter of mana sustain in the beginning. So if Blizzard could send help, that would be great. I know they gave us 5 mana off before. I think we could do a bit better with the next patch, and we could really bring Fireball into the meta. Another con is that it is a bit squishy if the barrier is depleted. That's just part of Sorc life. She isn't the tankiest character in the game, but I do believe that we've been able to work in a fair amount of damage reduction here, and therefore the build feels very comfortable in tier 50s. I have not taken it above that yet, but I've been waiting until we finish Renown and get all that stuff done before I start really pushing it in and seeing if we can make it to the tier 60-70 range. Okay, so as for the gear, I'm not going to go over every single affix and every single skill tree passive and all of that stuff for you guys. That'll take way too long. Instead, I will let you know that there is a link for Mobalytics down below that I've created for you guys, and there is also a Lothrix link there for anybody who likes to use Lothrix as well. So the build is available for you guys to play with, tinker with, copy, iterate on, make better, whatever you're going to do. Absolutely play the build because Fireball is a lot of fun. But just to give you the long and short, we'll go over some of the aspects here that I chose. On the helmet, I went with the crowd control effect spreading when we hit an enemy. This is really good since we have a lot of crowd control effects in the build amongst the chills and the freezes from the blizzard. We have the immobilizes coming from the fireballs. It's really nice being able to pass those around the screen. We then use Raiment of the Infinite, and Raiment is pretty self-explanatory, pretty badass chest. It's really hard to do without. We also use some normal gloves here. I am not lucky enough, and I have found this exact pair of gloves twice now, and both times have hit only +3 Fireball on them, sadly. So I still have a rank to Fireball to grab here. This will give us about 10% more damage. It'll be pretty nice. And there's lots and lots of other places where we can still work in damage on the build. The legs, I went with Disobedience. Lo and behold, Disobedience has to be in pretty much every build. So that one we've got on the legs. On the boots, I used exploiters, and this to me is just insane. There's a toss-up to be, there's kind of an argument to be made about the boots. The boots, you could use Isus if you're all about the crit chance. Isus are pretty good. They have some decent movement speed. They scale your crit based off of, I believe it's like 30% of your movement speed bonus. So they are quite nice in terms of just gaining a decent amount of crit chance to your build. I did find that with the bonuses from our passives, as well as a little bit from our legendary. There's a legendary we use that gives us like another 5% crit. We get some from our gear, all of that stuff. With that, we end up at around 65 or 70% crit. And to me, that's, you know, it's not amazing yet, but it's still good enough that we see crits constantly. And at the end of the day, I know that I can simply go ahead and get better gear, like better rings, to grab myself better crit chance, because on my rings, the crit chance is quite bad. So we'll be able to make sure to upgrade our crit from there. I could also go ahead and try and target a little more dexterity and try to boost my crit from there. But ultimately, I think that it stands for me that exploiters is just the better play. We get a little bit of crowd control duration increase, which is really, really nice, and it is actually noticeable. And then we also get the unstoppable enemies. We deal 47% up to 50% increased damage to them. This includes enemies like your increased health mobs, your structures throughout the game, bosses, certain elites, of course. It is very, very useful to have that huge damage boost when you come across those mobs. So I just like to use these boots. And then, of course, you also have the levels to flame shield, which can be very useful because it gives you additional time on your flame shield, which means additional time to be immune, which is really, really nice. The weapon, we use the Staff of Endless Rage. This is pretty self-explanatory. It is the Fireball Staff. And this staff, you definitely do not want to do the build without it. So get this in there as soon as possible. For the amulet, I went with Conceited. We have barriers up literally all the time, so this just made the most sense. So 38% increased damage while we have a barrier. For the rings, we chose to go with the mana aspects. It's pretty mandatory on Sorc because, again, as I was stating before, especially when it comes to fire builds, her mana sustain is really, really bad if it's not like Hydra. So it's just pretty mandatory that you go ahead and you get your restoration available on the aspects. Now, the downside to this is that the aspects are pretty damn rare to find. It took me a while just to find these two aspects, and they're on these rings. I have better rings that I'd love to get into right now to boost the build's damage and boost it some more, but I can't because I can't find the aspects. So, and believe me, I've been grinding like crazy to try and find them. So I just think it's one of those things where, you know, once you've got these aspects, make sure you're putting them onto absolutely banger rings that you know you are going to use, because otherwise you'll end up in a spot where you have it on a sacred like me and you're not very happy. Other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory in the gear. You want to focus on a lot of the same damage stats that most builds focus on. Crit chance, crit damage, vulnerable damage. Obviously, you're going to look for things like damage to burning enemies, damage to crowd-controlled enemies, damage to chilled enemies. Things like that are also going to be good. Damage to chilled enemies would probably be your last one that you'd want to get. But of course, it would still have effectiveness as we chill things all the time with Blizzard and with our Frost Nova and things like that. Just to quickly run over the glyphs here, we'll do that in order. We first use Elementalist. This one is really, really nice because we're going to get a whole bunch of damage from it, and it's just nice to have in there because you need a 40 intelligence requirement for the additional bonus. And I found it was just really easy to get in that first slot, the first board there. The next one is Flame Feeder. Flame Feeder for every 5 dex purchased within range, dealing 9.5% increased damage to burning targets. This is really, really nice, of course, because everything is burning when we play, so this is just a lot of damage, and then we get an additional 10% increased direct damage to burning enemies with the bonus. The next one after that is Imbiber. Imbiber is one of those glyphs that is insanely strong. It, I think, flies under the radar on a lot of people. But I have noticed a lot of guides, some of the latest guides are starting to pick up on it and use it. And yeah, it's just something that is so strong. I mean, our build right now is sitting at around 11.4k attack power. If I were to remove Imbiber right here, so if I remove Imbiber, my build immediately shoots down to 5,800 attack power. So the power of Imbiber is quite substantial. It's a really good one. And I know that attack power is not the be all end all of calculations for the damage on your build. However, what I can tell you is that my build prior to using Imbiber was doing okay damage. It was pretty good. With Imbiber is doing far better damage. So Imbiber has certainly done some good things for this build. The next one would be Destruction. This is going to boost our critical strike damage with our core skills. Very important, as we are a crit focused build. And the critical strikes increase all damage the enemy takes from you by 2% for 10 seconds, up to 12%. The next one after that would be Tactician. Tactician, I'm still leveling up, so I still have some time to go on this. But this is going to give us a big bonus to all the rare nodes that are within range. And the rare nodes that we have within range that I really want the bonus on is the vulnerable damage, so that we can stack more vulnerable damage, more intelligence through this node. And then, of course, if I can manage to find myself more willpower, I can get even more vulnerable damage out of that. And that will only add to what we're able to stack onto the rings later on and eventually become some very big vulnerable damage dealers. But yeah, looking forward to getting this glyph